Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, stumbled around in the dark, and suddenly felt like you were in that famous rotating hallway fight scene from the movie Inception?
Oh man, that is the worst feeling.
Right. The floor feels like the ceiling, the walls are tilting, and you have to grab a door frame just to remember which way is up.
It's completely disorienting.
It really is. Or maybe you've tried reading a book in the passenger seat of a moving car, and your stomach instantly decides to do backflips even though you're sitting completely still.
Yeah, the classic car sickness.
Exactly. If you've ever experienced that bizarre world-spinning sensation, you are already intimately familiar with the star of today's show. Welcome to the Deep Dive Lab.
It's fantastic to be here. We are taking a look at a stack of research today that covers something you rely on every single second of your waking life.
Every single second.
Yeah, runs completely in the background, keeping you functional, and yet, well, we almost never give it a second thought until the system crashes.
Today, we're custom tailoring this deep dive just for you, focusing on a hidden superpower you possess, your sixth sense.
And no, we aren't talking about seeing ghosts.
No ghosts today. We are talking about equilibrioception, the hidden sense of balance. We've got a really fascinating stack of sources to get through today.
We really do.
We'll be unpacking some cutting-edge papers from the Journal of Neuroscience and the journal Virtual Reality, digging into some wild historical medical surveys, and even checking in on some 2025 and 2026 updates from NASA's International Space Station.
It's quite the journey. We'll explore how your brain processes wildly conflicting sensory information, why virtual reality makes so many of us brutally sick, how science is fixing that exact problem, and this is my favorite part, the mechanics of why standing next to a speeding train doesn't instantly knock you off your feet.
Okay, let's unpack this. Equilibrioception. We all know the basic five senses Aristotle gave us over 2,000 years ago. Sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell.
By the class.
The classics. But the hidden mechanics keeping us upright are infinitely more complex than that. It's the ultimate biological team effort. We're talking about a constant, real-time collaboration between your visual system taking in the room, your proprioception,
Which is the feedback from your muscles and joints mapping your limbs.
exactly, and of course your vestibular system.
And that vestibular system is really the command center. Buried deep inside your inner ear, you have these three fluid-filled loops called the semicircular canals.
Like biological gyroscopes.
That's a perfect way to describe it. They detect rotational movement, like when you shake your head no. Then you also have these tiny structures called the otolith organs, which are dedicated entirely to detecting gravity and linear acceleration.
So like the sensation of riding up in a fast elevator.
Yes, exactly. When your eyes, your muscles, and your inner ear are all sending matching data to your brain, everything is totally fine. But discovering how to actually test that hidden inner ear hardware required one of the most serendipitous accidents in medical history.
I love the history on this. Walk us through what happened with Dr. Barani.
Okay, so back in the early 1900s, there's this Austrian physician named Dr. Robert Barani. He was trying to find a reliable way to examine the inner ear, but the technology just didn't exist yet.
Right.
So one day, he's performing a completely routine procedure, just syringing a patient's ear to clean it out with water. Suddenly, the patient complains of intense dizziness,
Just from water.
just from the water. But the patient adds a crucial detail. He tells Barani that he only gets giddy when the doctor's water isn't warm enough. He says that at home, with warm water, he's perfectly fine.
So Barani tries to fix it by asking the nurse for warmer water.
He does, but the nurse brings back a bowl of water that is drastically too hot.
Oh no.
Yeah. So Barani syringes the patient's ear again, and the patient immediately shouts that the room is spinning. Barani, being a brilliant observer, leans in and looks closely at the patient's eyes. He notices an involuntary darting motion, a condition we call nystagmus.
The eyes were violently flicking back and forth.
Exactly. But he noticed a critical difference. With the hot water, the patient's eyes were darting in the exact opposite direction than they had been with the cold water.
That's wild.
Barani realized the temperature of the water was physically altering the density of the fluid inside the patient's semicircular canals. The hot water made the inner ear fluid rise, the cold water made it sink.
So this artificial movement tricked the brain into thinking the head was spinning.
You got it. He had accidentally invented a way to isolate and test the inner ear. It's a procedure we still use today, known as the caloric response.
The science is fascinating, but the historical twist is just absurd. His accidental discovery was so groundbreaking that the Nobel Committee awarded him the 1914 Nobel Prize in Medicine
But they couldn't actually give it to him.
because World War I had broken out. Barani was serving as a civilian surgeon for the Austrian army, and he'd been captured by the Russians. When he won the highest honor in science, he was literally sitting in a freezing prisoner of war camp in Central Asia.
The Nobel Committee couldn't even deliver the telegram.
It took the personal diplomatic intervention of Prince Karl of Sweden, working through the Red Cross, to secure Barani's release from the POW camp so he could finally travel to claim his prize in 1916.
Imagine sitting in a Russian POW camp, assuming you'll be there for years, and suddenly a Swedish prince pulls you out because you won a Nobel Prize for squirting hot water into a guy's ear.
It's cinematic.
It really highlights how chaotic scientific progress can be. But while Barney proved how the inner ear hardware worked, he didn't solve the software problem. This raises an important question. How exactly does our central nervous system process all this spatial information, especially when our senses are actively contradicting each other?
Here's where it gets really interesting, because sensory conflict happens to all of us constantly. Let's paint a picture that I guarantee you've experienced.
Okay, let's hear it.
You're sitting on a train at a station, looking out the window, totally relaxed. Suddenly, the massive train on the tracks right next to you starts to slowly pull away. For a terrifying split second, your brain panics. You feel with absolute certainty that your train is the one moving backward.
Oh yeah, you might even brace yourself.
Right. Then, a second later, the feeling vanishes, and you realize you're stationary. But take that same scenario and flip it. You're standing on the station platform. That massive train pulls in right in front of you, filling your entire field of vision with high-speed movement. Why doesn't that massive amount of visual motion trick your brain into falling backward onto the concrete?
To answer that, we have to look at a brilliant 2025 paper published in the Journal of Neuroscience.
Who's the team behind this one?
The researchers are Lorenz Aslander, Matthias Albrecht, and Marcus Gruber from the University of Constance. And they were working alongside Robert J. Perdurka from the Veterans Affairs Portland Healthcare System and Oregon Health and Science University.
Quite the team.
Absolutely. They wanted to map exactly how humans resolve these severe sensory conflicts. Historically, scientists assumed the brain just acted like a soundboard, smoothly turning down the volume on vision and turning up the volume on the inner ear when things got confusing.
But the reality is much more aggressive than just tweaking a volume dial.
Much more. Aslander and his colleagues discovered a highly sophisticated nonlinear feedback mechanism. They call it the reference frame motion estimator, or RFM for short. It doesn't just blend signals, it actively judges them.
I like to think of this RFM estimator as a really tough bouncer at an exclusive Hollywood nightclub. The nightclub is your brain's balance center.
A bouncer, I like that.
Yeah, so to get inside and influence your physical posture, your senses have to show their IDs to the bouncer. So you're standing on the platform, the train whizzes by, your visual system runs up to the club door, waving its hands, screaming, "We are moving at 50 miles per hour, look at all this motion."
But the bouncer doesn't just let vision waltz in. The bouncer checks with the inner ear. And the inner ear says, "No, we aren't moving at all. There is zero physical acceleration. My otolith organs are quiet."
Because of that stark contradiction, the bouncer recognizes that the visual reference frame is what's moving, not the body. The Aslander paper details how the brain employs a velocity dead zone.
Yeah, let me explain how that dead zone works in practice. If the sensory conflict is small and slow, like the slow-moving train out the window, the brain might get confused for a second and try to average the signals out. That's why you feel that brief sensation of moving backward.
But what about the fast train?
Once the visual movement crosses a specific velocity threshold, like a fast-moving train flying past the platform that dead zone activates, the bouncer literally throws the fake visual input out of the club.
Rejected.
Totally rejected. Your brain completely discards the visual motion of the train and relies entirely on your inner ear and the tactile feedback of your feet on the concrete.
And it does this automatically in a fraction of a second without you ever having to consciously think about keeping your balance. It's a light and fast, nonlinear correction.
What's fascinating here is that this automatic correction mechanism evolved over millions of years to handle the physical laws of the real world. But as we move into the modern era, we are willingly throwing our brains into digital environments where the laws of physics are completely simulated.
Which brings us to the metaverse and the massive looming problem of virtual reality. We all want to put on a headset and explore incredible digital worlds like the Oasis in Ready Player One. But the reality is, for a huge percentage of the population, putting on a VR headset leads to brutal, sweating, room-spinning nausea, cybersickness.
Cybersickness is the primary hurdle for mass VR adoption. It happens because we are essentially short-circuiting the bouncer we just talked about.
Yes.
In VR, your eyes are telling the bouncer, we are flying a fighter jet through a canyon barrel rolling at Mach 2. But your inner ear and your muscles are saying, we are sitting on a stationary couch in the living room.
Yeah.
Because the visual input in modern VR is so immersive, it completely overwhelms the RFM estimator.
The brain panics. It assumes you've ingested a neurotoxin because your senses are hallucinating, and its defense mechanism is to make you nauseous so you'll throw up the poison.
Exactly.
So how do we hack the software to fix it?
We turn to recent research published in the journal Virtual Reality. This was authored by Yeshan Yang, Gerard Jung-Yeon Kim, and Hanseab Kim from Konyang University.
What were they looking at?
They examined two competing theories for cybersickness. First, the rest frame theory argues you get sick because you lose a stable frame of reference, like a physical horizon. The second is the postural instability theory, which argues that sickness happens because the brain's balance system gets so overwhelmed by the visual noise that you physically lose your postural stability, even while standing still.
The brain gets so distracted by the digital canyon that it forgets how to hold your spine straight.
Precisely the premise. So Yang and his team designed a rather intense 2-week-long experiment to test this. They wanted to see if actively, deliberately training a person's balance could immunize them against cybersickness.
What did they have them do?
They had participants put on VR headsets and stand on one leg, which is incredibly demanding on the nervous system, while the virtual world spun and moved around them.
That sounds like an absolute torture chamber for your inner ear.
Standing on one leg while the horizon tilts in a headset.
It was grueling for the participants, but the results were undeniable. They proved that deliberately training your physical balance while inside an immersive VR environment drastically reduced cybersickness over time.
Wow.
As the participants got better at physically balancing on one leg while ignoring the digital chaos, their nausea plummeted.
The body learned to trust the proprioception over the vision. But the most mind-blowing part of this study is the transferability. That is the core breakthrough. The participants who trained their balance in one specific highly controlled VR environment could suddenly go play entirely new, untrained VR games, roller coasters, racing simulators without getting sick.
They didn't just build a tolerance to one game.
No, they fundamentally upgraded their brain's overarching software for handling sensory conflict. And doing this balance training inside an immersive VR headset worked vastly better than trying to train balance while looking at a traditional 2D computer screen.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? It proves your brain's bouncer isn't just a rigid piece of biological code, it's incredibly plastic. You can literally teach your brain to ignore the visual chaos of the metaverse and trust your physical body simply by practicing difficult physical tasks while immersed.
It's wild that we can hack our brains just by standing on one leg in a headset.
It really is. But what happens when you can't just take the headset off? What happens when the physical rules of your environment are permanently changed? That's exactly what NASA is dealing with right now on the International Space Station.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, neuroplasticity is a matter of survival in extreme environments. Looking at the 2025 and 2026 updates from the ISS, astronauts like Butch Wilmore are up there doing spacewalks, swabbing vents for microbes, and living for months in microgravity.
And that environment throws human equilibrioception into total disarray.
Absolutely. Remember those otolith organs in the inner ear that detect gravity? In space, there is no gravity pulling down on them.
They're just floating up there, sending a dial tone to the brain.
Basically, yes. If you or I were suddenly dropped onto the ISS, the sensory conflict would trigger violent space adaptation syndrome. But the astronauts' brains undergo adaptive plasticity. The central nervous system quickly realizes the inner ear's gravity sensors are feeding it garbage data, so it aggressively turns down their volume.
Just mutes them.
Mutes them. The brain reweights the entire sensory system, relying almost entirely on vision and the tactile feedback from their hands and feet pushing off the station walls.
They adapt, but then they have to come back to Earth. The gravity turns back on, the otolith organs suddenly wake up, and their brains have to completely rewire themselves again just to remember how to walk in a straight line.
Exactly.
Which brings this entire conversation right back down to Earth and into our own living rooms. The need to retrain the brain's balance system isn't just for astronauts or hardcore VR gamers. It is a massive, looming medical necessity for our aging population and for people recovering from neurological injuries.
This is where we see cutting-edge tech democratizing healthcare. We have researchers like Cienko from Michigan Engineering utilizing artificial intelligence to create home-based, machine learning-assisted balance training. Cienko's work is addressing a massive gap. In rural areas across the U.S. and globally, access to physical therapists who specialize in vestibular rehab is incredibly limited.
So how does the AI actually step in to replace an in-person therapist?
By using advanced computer vision and wearable sensors, patients can perform complex balance training in their own living rooms. The AI acts as a virtual, real-time therapist. It maps their skeleton, monitors their center of mass to the millimeter, analyzes their sway patterns, and dynamically adjusts the difficulty of the exercises on a screen.
That's incredible.
Yeah, if you're relying too much on vision, the AI might instruct you to close your eyes and focus on the tactile feedback from your feet, tracking how well you compensate.
It's giving them that VR-style neuro upgrade, but for surviving the real world. And we have a new understanding of exactly why this kind of active physical training is so vital, thanks to a fascinating paper in the journal Springer.
Oh, this study is fantastic.
It really is. It was authored by Jian Wang, Jun Liu, and their colleagues at Zhejiang University. They took a brilliant approach by hooking people up to EEG machines to map their real-time brainwaves, while simultaneously using EMG sensors to read their muscle activity and then throwing them into sensory conflict scenarios.
The Zhejiang University study is a landmark because it maps the exact physical connection between the brain and the body during a balance crisis. They focused on the corticomuscular network, which you can picture as the direct, high-speed telephone line between the cortex of your brain and your leg muscles.
They wanted to see what happens to that line when the brain gets confused by visual motion.
And the results were a massive paradigm shift. When visual information conflicts with the inner ear, like our moving train scenario, it doesn't just make you feel dizzy. It actively impairs the connectivity of that corticomuscular network.
The signal from the brain to the muscles literally gets weaker and filled with static.
The brain is dedicating so much processing power to doing the math on the sensory conflict, trying to figure out which sense is lying, that its ability to send clear, stabilizing commands down to the legs is severely compromised.
This means cognitive confusion literally drains your physical strength. Your brain is so busy dealing with the visual conflict that it drops the call to your legs.
That's a great way to put it.
That elevates the importance of Michigan Engineering's AI therapy and the Kunyang University VR training to a whole new level. You aren't just training your inner ear to feel less dizzy, you're actively strengthening those neurological telephone wires between your brain and your muscles so your body doesn't give out when your environment gets confusing.
You're forcing the entire corticomuscular network to become robust enough to handle high cognitive loads without dropping the physical connection.
This has been an incredibly deep dive, and I want to make sure you walk away with the absolute most vital nuggets of knowledge from all these sources. Here are the top 3 takeaways. Number 1, your sense of balance, your equilibrioception, is not just some static background feature you're born with. It's a highly complex, highly trainable sixth sense that relies on a constant, real-time negotiation between your eyes, your inner ears, and your muscles.
Number 2, your brain possesses an incredible automatic mechanism, the reference frame motion estimator, that actively filters out fake visual motion. It utilizes a velocity dead zone to act as a bouncer, tossing out confusing visual data to keep you standing upright when a train, or the world, speeds past you.
And number 3, because this biological system is so highly plastic, we can actively hack it. Whether it's a Michigan Engineering AI program helping a senior citizen strengthen their corticomuscular network in a rural town, or a gamer doing one-legged stands to conquer VR cybersickness based on the Kanyang University research, we can deliberately rewire our brains to handle the sensory chaos of the modern world.
Looking at all this data, my big picture takeaway really goes back to the idea that knowledge is most valuable when it's understood and applied. Our sense of balance anchors our entire bodily self-experience. It tells us where we end and the rest of the physical world begins.
It's foundational.
Completely foundational. Protecting it and deliberately training it, whether through advanced AI at home, in a virtual reality headset, or while floating on a space station, is what keeps us literally and figuratively grounded in a rapidly moving, constantly shifting world.
It's incredible to realize just how much control we actually have over our own sensory hardware. Thank you so much for joining us in the lab today and exploring your hidden sixth sense with us. If you enjoyed unpacking this research, please make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deep dive into the science that shapes your daily life.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Before we go, I want to leave you with one final, slightly mind-bending question to ponder on your own. We've seen that our brains are plastic enough to adapt to the complete lack of gravity in space, and we've learned that we can train our balance bouncer to completely ignore the physical world while we're immersed in virtual reality. So what happens to our sense of balance if we eventually start spending the vast majority of our waking lives working, playing, and socializing inside the metaverse? If our brains get too good at ignoring physical reality, will our sixth sense eventually forget how to navigate the real world entirely? Think about that the next time you put on a headset. See you next time.